John asks, how is the 4% calculated? There's a function, I'll show it to you real quick, and then we'll not talk about it again for a couple more weeks because it won't make any sense right now. Your sample size that you need is a function of what's called a confidence level, that's the z value squared, times the number 0.25, divided by whatever the margin of error is. So mathematically, if you switch these two,
Good Will Hunting right there.
if you switch those, you can figure out the... See, it's ridiculous, right? It doesn't mean anything.
It's like Good Will Hunting.
Well, there's a formula that does it. It doesn't make any sense right now, but it's a function of that number and that number. The bigger that is, the smaller the margin of error is. Fair enough?
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. That's part of 243 and mostly 244.
Is it plus or minus correlation coefficient?
It's related, not the same thing, but related.
Yeah.
It's related because it's a measure of
Okay.
uncertainty. It's a
Yeah.
measure of uncertainty, but it's not the exact same thing. Very good question. Very good question. Here's why I care about putting the plus or minus on there. That was the first claim. Support for offshore drilling reached new highs. So we think, yeah, more opposed than or excuse me, more favor than opposed. We okay with that? The headline also makes it seem like more are in favor of ANWR drilling than oppose ANWR drilling. So when you go to the question about ANWR drilling, which is here, do you think ANWR in Alaska should or should not be opened up for oil exploration? Well, 49% said yes, 45% said no. 49 is bigger than 45, correct? I mean, that's mathematics. But it's not exactly 49, is it?
No.
It's at least 45 up to 53, yeah, if you add and subtract 4. So this could be as low as 45 or as high as 53, which also includes the majority, 50%, doesn't it? And 45 could be as low as 41 or as high as 49. And what do you notice about those ranges of numbers?
They overlap.
They overlap each other, which means there's a potential that this number is actually higher than this one in the population, even though it didn't necessarily show in the middle of the sample. This is what they call a statistical dead heat. You'll very often hear that phrase during election years. It's too close to call. Statistical dead heat. That's too close to call. I don't know why they're even mentioning that ANWR is now more in favor. That's a dead heat. You can't make that call based on that data. If it looked like that, you could. But I sure as hell can't do it from here. It's too damn close. Make sense?
Yep.
That's why it's so important to interpret margins of error correctly. Because and then you'll hear the next week, it's overturned. It's not overturned. It's exactly the same thing as it was. You just misinterpreted it last time. And you might be doing it again right now. Sorry, I get excited about this because, my God. Please, Tom.
The margin of error, does it only apply to the favor and opposed?
It applies to any measure in the study.
No, sorry, I guess I'd like to know opinion.
Oh, you can also apply it to there, although it does mathematically fall apart to some degree, doesn't it? Like here.
They know they had some, right?
Yes.
They can't go -1.
Yes, and technically speaking, it depends on how you calculate it. It can vary depending on what's called the point estimate. You taking 244?
I will.
You will. We'll discuss it in more depth then. But because of the value of what's called p hat, which are these things here, it varies with p hat as well. And that's how you can adjust for that 3% versus 53%. Ish. So yes, your answer to your question is a resounding yes. It does depend on those, and it can be accounted for with that. I don't want to get into it too much today because it kind of takes us beyond where we need to go today.
Short version, does like if no opinion was 17 or as it gets bigger, does it affect the margin?
It does. It does. Quick answer, yes. It will affect it. As it gets bigger, the margin of error actually widens, which is kind of counterintuitive maybe, but as you get further and further away from 50%, the margins of error shrink. It's a cool mathematical result of that, actually, believe it or not. So, great questions. David, go.
Unless I'm missing part of the article, it says that it reaches new highs, doesn't show you the statistics.
Yes, I didn't bother showing you the ones before because they're also inconclusive, because it changed by like 2%. But since the margin of error is 4, changing by 2, you can't perceive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like saying I'm shorter now than I was when I got up this morning because gravity pulled me down. Well, is it meaningful or is it just because gravity pulled you down? Are you now 5'9"? Right? Put your hair down, Rule. You're 6'3" with hair. Right? So it's that kind of thing. There is more, but it was even more. I've got a similar graph to that for your quiz next week. A time series graph that actually shows over the past, I think it's like 30 years of public opinion. So we'll get to that in time. Dave, great question.
Oh, and I just noticed that for 50%.
It's all good. It's all good. Again, it's not even relevant because these are so close to 50%, right? not relevant. It's relevant for 60, but not for 49. More on that in your quiz. If I got to fill a lot of you into this quiz because it's fresh in your mind. You're like, oh, I like this, I can understand this. All right. Oh, before I do this, were there any questions about that Gallup result that we just, you guys getting a pretty good feel of it? You have to apply a margin of error when? When do margins of error become important? Whenever you take, good, good. Can I make it more general? A sample. When you sample a population, you have to slap a margin of error on in order to be correct. The bigger the sample, the smaller the margin. That's another conditional. But you have to put the margin of error when you take data, a poll, any kind of sample data from a population. If you count the whole population, you don't have to do a margin of error, but you'll